Welcome back for the second half of the day here on the studio stage. And our next talk is about AI, the big buzzword. And we would like to hear about AI being integrated into NEOS to put it to productive use and not just generate stupid images, or maybe also some funny images we will see. So please give an applause to André Hoffmann from Punkt.de.
Yes. I welcome you all to my talk, integrating NEOS in sorry, it's too big for me. I welcome you all to my talk of integrating AI assistance into NEOS, a small adventure story of mine. I would like to talk in this talk about my adventures, which I had in the last year with integrating AI and what it looks like and how I achieved it. But first, some words about me. I'm André Hoffmann. I'm working at the moment at Punkt.de GmbH here in Karlsruhe. I'm doing web stuff, so around 7 to 8 years. It's depending on your point of view. My main focus is NEOS and JS and CSS, and also a little bit of PHP. And in my free time, I like to read manga, for example, something like One Piece or Naruto, if you know it. And for those who don't know what manga is, it's a type of comic coming from Japan. I also like to play games like Anno and other strategy games, and I have really much fun learning new things. But enough about me. Let's look at the plan for today. So, what's the plan? My plan is to talk about a little bit about the history of all what I did. So let's first take a look back at how it all started. Here I would like to talk how my interests were sprung and what then as the next step were my ideas or my questions. Then I would like to present you my story so far, what I achieved in the last year. And in the last section, I would like to try to answer the question, have I learned something new? Had I have fun? So let's get started with a little bit of a backstory. This whole thing started for me in the fall of the year 2022. To be more precisely, around news from the 30th November of 22 with the release of this little tool and the news around it. I think everyone knows it, ChatGPT. And in the following months, I also was, like many of you, were flooded with news about new AI tools, for example, for image generation like Midjourney, but also tools like GitHub Copilot, a code assistant which should help with productivity. And in the following year, following all these releases in the year 2023, all big tech players started to dive into AI, dive into this topic. Examples of this are Microsoft's products around Copilot, but also Google with Gemini, and also Facebook, which took a rather independent approach with open sourcing their models, and this made the year 2023 especially exciting for me. So what's my view around this? Not my view, but what was the situation in this whole thing? I think every one of you is also aware of this. We have a great hype, especially in the last year. It was sometimes a situation where every day, every week, we have a new AI tool, a great thing with many, many possibilities. We had AI tools for text generation. We had AI tools for image generation. We had also AI tools for speech generation. And if you follow the news, at the beginning of this year, there was also an AI tool for video generation from OpenAI. It seemed like everywhere was AI, and everywhere there was this promise of AI making everything faster, better, and making everyone more productive. But there is also a negative side to it all. If there is AI who can write text, who needs writers? If there is AI who makes really beautiful pictures, who needs artists? And if there is something like GitHub Copilot, who needs coders? So there is fear, sometimes really exaggerated, sometimes it's a feeling that AI will be the next threat to society. Some would also say AI will kill us all if we are not aware of it. So we have at the moment, and in the whole last year, a situation of this AI hype train, like with any new technology, and a worse situation with AI fears and the implication on society, on work, and so on. But what is my view? What is the view of me in the last year about this whole topic? First and foremost, for me, AI is a really cool and new technology with many great possibilities. I think if I look at the examples, what can be achieved with it, it's great. I must say I'm also hyped, probably a little bit biased, therefore, about all these possibilities. But I also see AI as a possible fun new toy. Great example for me personally was this year. Okay, no internet. So you can find this video on YouTube, and a really great bunch of similar videos, which I would describe as meme videos, where the creator used different AI services to generate them. For example, for this video, there was used an image generation tool for generating several images based on Harry Potter, but also an speech generation tool to give a speech to the characters, and also a tool to generate a video from all these images and make a cool clip. As I said, sadly I don't seem to have internet here, so I would ask you to look it up yourself if you are interested. For me it was mainly a really fun example what you can make with AI for entertainment, for example. But I also saw it so that AI can be used by any developer, because we have open APIs like the API from OpenAI, or documented APIs and services for developers who can then use AI to build their own products. And so I thought all this time the last year, and after a great discussion with one of my colleagues at a lab day that we had last December, I decided to make all my ideas into something like a tool. So let's talk about my ideas next. A small Christmas story, because it all happened in my last Christmas holidays. So my ideas, or better said, what are my questions? In the first place, I ask myself, what can be achieved with AI, with NEOS? So the first one is, how good does understand AI NEOS? If AI understands NEOS good enough, can I get something like a node structure from it? From a point as a developer, with such a node structure, I could possibly build something. The next question, to be more specific, is can I get a sensible node structure? So is the node structure representing something like a blog article or a news article? That would be great if this can be achieved with AI. So I also must ask myself what is needed for the prompt which I send to the AI, what information must it contain, and how can I instruct the AI correctly to achieve probably something like a sensible no structure in the response. I also learned or viewed AI can generate images. So can I use AI to generate images that are good for such a generated news article or a blog article? And from a developer standpoint is how consistent are these responses? If I get one a really good response and the next response isn't usable in my program, it isn't really good, or I can't really develop something. With all these questions, I thought about, and then I had an idea, and here I decided, I had the idea how to integrate it now into Neos, and my thought was, okay, I want to have it integrated a little bit tighter into Neos. It should be more natural to use it and not like something, a sidebar where I have my chat or probably a separate window where all this AI stuff happens. I wanted to try to build something like a custom creation dialog where a user gives his input and then AI does his thing. So to achieve this, my idea is, okay, in the front end, I must build this creation dialog. And in the back end, I have an action which takes all the information from this dialog and talks with the OpenAI endpoints, for example, with the text generation endpoint, if it's usable for me, and with the image generation endpoint, if this is also an option for me to generate possibly my idea of an article. So with this idea, I started to work. So let's take a look at my story so far. So first thing first for me was learning a little bit about the OpenAI RP. To get to know the OpenAI RP, I thought about it, and yes, I thought, what do I need? I have user import and I want to generate an article from it. So the best endpoint for this is the text generation import. Like it is also used in the ChatGPT application where also text and code is generated in the web UI. The documentation for it can be found here, and I read it and tried the experiment which is there presented. I wrote small JavaScript application according to the example. I gave it this prompt. I said, okay, AI, please generate me a node structure with a heading, a text, and images for Neos CMS, and if possible, let it be JSON. So, and sending it, I get something like this. And so you see, here's the typical description around the JSON, what everything is and what everything should be. But the most interesting part for me as a developer was this JSON. If I take a look at it, I see, hey, that's great. I have a node structure. I have a description for a possible page. I have description for child nodes. And I have here the description for the child nodes like text, like image, and heading. So I thought, great, the AI can something do with Neos. So let's start building. So the next step in this whole process for me was building a Neos UI plugin. So I looked it up and found this documentation on how to create an extension to the Neos UI, because the first step would be to build this new creation dialog. And I started it and thought, okay, I need a little bit more. So I created a new package. Here is my JavaScript code for the Neos UI plugin. And for the first step, I also built a small backend controller, which then later would be my controller responsible for talking with the OpenAI RP. But first, it only generates a simple success message. And then, after this, that was something relatively simple for me. I know it from other projects which I had worked with. And here then starts the point where I needed to learn new things. I needed to understand the creation dialog in the current NEOS system, because I wanted to try to replicate as much of it as possible, or use existing parts of it to integrate with my dialog. I delved into the NEOS UI code, learned about Redux and Redux sagas, and I must say, for me it was a relative hard task. I thought sometimes it's really, really complex to understand it, but at the end I achieved my custom creation dialog. Here you can see some code snippets from it, which I find the most interesting. Here is my request to my backend, where I also add the CSRF token to use the login mechanisms from NEOS to be logged in and securely communicate with my backend controller. And here is the dialog, the UI for it. I here use the existing dialog element from NEOS and adjusted it a little bit with my content and a little bit of styling later, and tested it, and it functioned. I got my success answer from my backend and thought, great, okay, next step. Let's talk with the OpenAI API. So I then delved again into the documentation of OpenAI and found, okay, OpenAI only supports officially has official libraries for JavaScript and Python. And for other languages, there is a list of open source libraries, and there were also some PHP libraries to talk with the OpenAI, and I decided to use the OpenAI client API and integrated it into my package. In the first step, I wrote a small command controller to test the library, test if I get similar results from it like in my JavaScript experiment, and everything seemed to work great. So I thought about, what do I now need to do in my controller? The library is there, I can generate a request, but what kind of request or what information does my request have to include? As necessary, I need to build a prompt from my user input, but I also thought, okay, the user input could be a little bit less information that is needed. I also wanted to support a specific kind of generation. So another information that I added to the prompt is the node type information from my distribution. My idea was, okay, in the real world, we have projects, and every project has its own NEOS distribution. And if I want to build a relatively good product from it, possibly I also should think about this option, so that the generation knows about this different kind of distributions and uses the correct node types in its generation. Therefore, I built in, or thought about building in, the node type information of the distribution. And I also thought about how to try to achieve a more consistent response. I looked at different examples of text generation and thought, okay, I think it would be also helpful if we have a response example. So I added a JSON structure which represents a possible response into the generation prompt. This all looks then something like this in code. Here you can see I get my node from my context path, use this node then to get all the node types. Then I need to filter out all not necessary node types. I only want my distribution node types. which are configured via YAML and then used in this filter. And then I also needed to a little bit clean up the found properties. For example, I don't want to generate SEO properties to have in the generated response. I only want have properties like a text for a text content element and nothing more. With all this filtered out, I built a structure which I then used in my prompt. Here you can see I add the super type, the possible child nodes, and the properties for which I want to have content generated. And then I also add the example, which is configured on the node type, for in this case on the page node type, which is my starting point. And all this information is added to the prompt and sent as the system message. The system message is a special message, which is you can see it as a primer for the generation, which gives ChatGPT some kind of context in which the following user input should be seen and the generation should be executed. And then in the second message, as the user, I add the user information from my dialog after a little bit of cleanup, so that the RP doesn't respond with a 404 or something like this. So after building this response, the next step is handling the API response. As I said, I also forgot, einmal zurück. Sorry. Okay. There in this prompt generation, there was also a parameter called request format, where I instruct the API to generate JSON. That's also really important for me, so that I have a more traditional kind of response, which I expect from a typical REST API to handle in my PHP code. And then the next step in this whole process is handling this response. Here, the interesting part is that I get my response, it is by JSON. Sometimes there was also needed some bit of cleanup. That code is really interesting. But the interesting part starts then here, again, where I have my structure and I build now my node types from it. For this, I wrote this recursive function where I built my node and then set all the properties to it, which is relatively simple. We have this function here, and then I go through it and build all child nodes and call this function again, so that I have the flexibility to react to all kinds of generated structures with different kind of nesting levels. Therefore, I wrote this recursive function. This function is really great for me, and I could react of very different kind of responses, and everything worked with this kind of function. Then the next step here is something that's code. Here's some code which is comes from the Neos UI, because I wanted to from here on then generate some kind of server response, which can then also be used in the UI to handle everything like in a normal creation dialog. So I again delved into the Neos node creation process and found out that I need to have several from this server response, server feedbacks objects generated and added to my response. And in my UI, I needed to react to it. Here, I added this small function, handle server feedback. This is a React Redux action, which is sadly a little bit complex to define. We are this kind of boilerplate code, but if you know Redux, then this seems familiar for you. But the more interesting part for me is this function here is the Redux Saga action, where I finally land and use the server feedback from my controller and give it to Neos. And from then on, Neos UI handles everything for me, and I don't need to implement custom state update logic, and that's great. And this is also what I wanted to achieve. So the result of this first steps was a text document like this. You can see here I have a page and I have my structure of headlines and text elements, which is also showed me it seems to function really good. And in the front end, it looked something like this, because the AI didn't include p-text here. It's still only text. But it was all right for me, and I thought how to further improve this all, and decided to think about how to extend this whole process, or to extend the generated response. So in the first step, I added more node types to my response example, because with this I tried to instruct the AI what I wanted to have. And it was really simple, extending my example, and then it was possible to generate 2 column elements or image elements. And for the image elements, I also added code or configuration so that the AI generates image prompts, because I thought, okay, I also can use AI to generate image prompts and then use AI to generate images from these prompts. So I adjusted my configuration of the response example, which worked relatively great. And then I needed to adjust my handling. Here you can see what I added. It's mainly this checks and this function, which I show you in a moment. I tested the response if there is an image prompt, and then I give this image prompt to this function. Sadly, sometimes the AI thought image prompt is a property. So I also needed to check in my properties, set properties function, if there is an image prompt, and handle it. So how do I handle it? I used as I said, AI for it. I have my prompt, which is generated via text generation, and then I can use this prompt to simply call the DALL-E 3 model via the images API and get an image as an URL, and then I imported this image via here resource import and then asset generation. That's a code that's relatively similar to some other packages like the image sources for Pexel or Unsplash. So this code is relatively similar to these packages, and therefore not really so interesting probably. And then at the end, I add this asset as my property to my image, and the end result of it. Schauen, ob ich das kriege, ist das. Here I have the user input. My idea was that the user input could be some kind of bullet point list, because an editor in the first step of generating an article in Neos would mainly generate some kind of ideas and write them down as bullet points. And then I would like to inject my process where then AI took over. That's my progress so far, and I think it's really great. Then to the last part. Have I learned something? Let's take a look back at all this. So, what are my answers so far? In this whole year where or not year, in the last months where I built all this in my free time and learned very much about AI, one of the first, and for me personally really great insight was that AI can do more than text. I can really generate structures which then I can then programmatically interact with and use to build websites, or better said, node structures for NEOS. I also learned that AI responses are are relatively diverse, but I think most users of ChatGPT know this, and therefore these responses aren't really reproducible. And from a developer standpoint, therefore also not really, probably not as really reliable as you are expecting from a typical REST API. But in the process, I also used always the newest model, and this last example is, for example, the latest 4.0 model, and I had the feeling that I get really better results with every new model without doing anything on my side, which is really great as a developer because the service starts to get better and better. I also learned and think that's great for all of you is every one of us can work with AI. We have these APIs, we have documentation, and it is really easy to learn the basics, but there is also a step that I learned which shows this generation is a task which is a great workload for the machine, and therefore the API response is relatively slow. The video I showed you is sped up. The process normally takes around 2 minutes. Yes. And what I also think is needed for me personally, if I want to work more with it, is to learn more about prompt engineering. At the moment, all my prompts are more my intuitive feelings, my gut feelings, and not really based on knowledge about prompt engineering. So, what now? For me, this package, and that's what I showed you, is a proof of concept, but it has potential probably for some kind of product. I don't know, but I was here testing and following my curiosity. I also still have some further development and ideas. One of them would be something like chat with my content. At the moment, I generate a full page and that's it. But I want to have some kind of interaction option with single note, text notes, headlines, or images. And for images, there also would be a great option to generate single images on image node type directly. There is also one other thing which I'm thinking about. At the moment, OpenAI is my only provider. I use OpenAI for everything. What is about our provider? Commercial, for example, from Google or from Anthropic. But what is about open source? As I said, Meta released their model as open source model. Everyone can use it, and there are already software for using these models. One example would be Ollama, a CLI tool for interacting with models, which you can download on your machine and let them run locally. And for images, we have Stable Diffusion and all possibilities to use it. And there are really many other things every one of you can probably think of, which can further improve this product. So, thank you all for your attention. Any questions?
Thank you very much, André, for this interesting deep dive into the Open API OpenAI API. That's it.
It's a tongue twister.
If you have any questions, I didn't see any a second ago. Please don't forget to submit them via the app. Now there are some. So we have questions. Did you test this approach with longer text and with the assumption that AI will split text into meaningful chunks suitable for various note types?
No, I didn't test it. I don't really also thought about longer text. For me, this input was already a relatively long text because this input was generated with AI. I took an existing article and said, give me the bullet points of this, summarize this article into bullet points. And then I got all these bullet points and also added some little bit of instructions like enrich the information with blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Yes. I didn't really test a much longer text because I didn't thought about if the text would be longer. I thought the use case would be more like an editor has a bullet list with keywords and want to write an article about it. And this was my point of view for developing this.
All right, thank you. There's a question about costs. Did you work with the free version or with the commercial one?
At the start, I worked with the free version, and then I started, especially for the GPT-4 models and the DALL-E things, with the commercial models. And the costs were okay. I think one generation were around 1 cent or less than 1 cent. It depends because in the usages you must count together the text generation and image generation. They are separately. They are counted separately for your bill at the end. So I didn't really take a great look into it. I only took sometimes a look at, but I would think it isn't really so expensive to use this approach, which I used, if you can have savings in the working time of an editor.
Mm-hmm. And do you recommend working with the free version at all, or would you recommend go with the paid version?
I think because the better models are paid, if you want to have better results, at the moment I would suggest using the commercial models. But as I said, there is the possibility of using open source models like Ollama, with Ollama, the Llama free models from Facebook, or taking a look at Hugging Face. That's a website where you can find pre-trained models for diverse use cases and download them from there and use them also with Ollama and other tools. There is really a great selection. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really test everything. I only tested OpenAI because this was the easiest way and the easiest way to start. Only in the following year, only in the year 23, I stumbled upon Ollama as a tool for using open source models. And at the moment, I didn't test it, but I know that Ollama has an OpenAI compatible API already implemented, so it could be a good next step to test it with Ollama and a corresponding model of my choice.
Okay. Thank you. There's another question. When you changed your models, as you showed us, the last one you used was
4.0.
4.0. Did you get a lot of bugs with your code? Did you have to change a lot?
I was surprised. I didn't need to change anything in my code. I would say the quality of the response increased in quality. Quality increased with every new better model. So it was. I would say it got easier to work with it.
Okay.
I think there could be some code in my experiments which probably isn't needed anymore because the response from the AI is better than at the start.
Okay. There's another question. What's your expectation for the future? Do you think AI could be used to create new components for NEOS, or is it only text and images in the near future? What do you think?
You might, you mean something like node types
Probably, yeah.
for coding then?
I think so. I think that's where the question goes.
I tested this with the open models. I tried in the last weeks to use open models while coding. And I must say this open models don't understand Fusion really good. Most of the time I get something like JavaScript or Python snippets, but seldom something that I can use. Therefore, I would think it could come to this situation if the models for coding get better, but at the moment I don't see it.
All right, and the last question. Did you publish your package?
No, I didn't publish it, and at the moment I'm also not thinking about publishing it. For me it's more like a private hobby thing, and as I said, I see potential and would like to think about it a little more.
All right. Thank you very much for your questions. André, thank you very much for presenting your progress. This is a little present from us for you coming here today. So thank you very much, André.